All right, it's time for part three of the wonderful, imaginary, and mystical world of the race hustlers, or as I like to call them, the race debaters. So let's just get into it. We start today with this guy, Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I'll probably be accused of racism for mispronouncing the name. He's one of the greatest pushers of reparations for slavery, so let's just listen to his rationale. This is Mr. Coates testifying before Congress.
Yesterday, when asked about reparations, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell offered a familiar reply. America should not be held liable for something that happened 150 years ago, since none of us currently alive are responsible. This rebuttal proffers a strange theory of governance, that American accounts are somehow bound by the lifetime of its generations. But well into this century, the United States was still paying out pensions to the heirs of Civil War soldiers. We honor treaties that date back some 200 years, despite no one being alive who signed those treaties. Many of us would love to be taxed for the things we are solely and individually responsible for. But we are American citizens, and thus bound to a collective enterprise that extends beyond our individual and personal reach. It would seem ridiculous to dispute invocations of the founders or the greatest generation on the basis of a lack of membership in either group. We recognize our lineage as a generational trust, as inheritance. And the real dilemma posed by reparations is just that, a dilemma of inheritance. It is impossible to imagine America without the inheritance of slavery. As historian Ed Baptist has written, enslavement, quote, shaped every crucial aspect of the economy and politics of America, so that by 1836, more than 600 million, or almost half of the economic activity in the United States derived directly or indirectly from the cotton produced by the million-odd slaves. By the time the enslaved were emancipated, they comprised the largest single asset in America, $3 billion in 1860, more than all the other assets in the country combined. The method of cultivating this asset was neither gentle cajoling nor persuasion, but torture, rape, and child trafficking. Enslavement reigned for 250 years on these shores. When it ended, this country could have extended its hallowed principles, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to all regardless of color. But America had other principles in mind. And so for a century after the Civil War, Black people were subjected to a relentless campaign of terror, a campaign that extended well into the lifetime of Majority Leader McConnell. It is tempting to divorce this modern campaign of terror, of plunder, from enslavement. But the logic of enslavement, of white supremacy, respects no such borders. And the god of bondage was lustful and begat many heirs. Coup d'etats and convict leasing, vagrancy laws and debt peonage, redlining and racist GI bills, poll taxes and state-sponsored terrorism. We grant that Mr. McConnell was not alive for Appomattox, but he was alive for the electrocution of George Stinney. He was alive for the blinding of Isaac Woodward. He was alive to witness kleptocracy in his native Alabama and a regime premised on electoral theft. Majority Leader McConnell cited civil rights legislation yesterday, as well he should, because he was alive to witness the harassment, jailing, and betrayal of those responsible for that legislation by a government sworn to protect them. He was alive for the redlining of Chicago and the looting of Black homeowners of some $4 billion. Victims of that plunder are very much alive today. I am sure they'd love a word with the Majority Leader. What they know, what this committee must know, is that while emancipation deadbolted the door against the bandits of America, Jim Crow wedged the windows wide open. And that is the thing about Senator McConnell's something. It was 150 years ago, and it was right now. The typical Black family in this country has 1/10 the wealth of the typical white family. Black women die in childbirth at 4 times the rate of white women. And there is, of course, the shame of this land of the free, boasting the largest prison population on the planet, of which the descendants of the enslaved make up the largest share. The matter of reparations is one of making amends and direct redress, but it is also a question of citizenship. In H.R. 40, this body has a chance to both make good on its 2009 apology for enslavement and reject fair weather patriotism, to say that a nation is both its credits and its debits, that if Thomas Jefferson matters, so does Sally Hemings, that if D-Day matters, so does Black Wall Street, that if Valley Forge matters, so does Fort Pillow. Because the question really is not whether we will be tied to the somethings of our past, but whether we are courageous enough to be tied to the whole of them. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right, Ta-Nehisi. Let's see here. What do we got?
Yesterday, when asked about
yesterday. All right. Well, his father was with the Black Panthers, so that may explain some things here. But moving on. He spent 5 years at Howard University, managed to never graduate, but he became a visiting professor at MIT, which is a pretty prestigious university. I mean, what the fuck? I don't know how hard it is to get a degree from Howard University. I mean, I suspect it's not too hard because Kamala Harris got her degree from there. So, but you know, Ta-Nehisi failed in that task. So he managed to get a gig with some, leftist magazines, writing articles, and he wrote a book called Between the World and Me. Now, in the book, he accuses white supremacy as the reasons for black-on-black crime. All right. So it's kind of amusing because you see, it's not just slavery. It's the Jim Crow laws. It's not just the Jim Crow laws. It's the employment discrimination. It's not just employment discrimination. It's systemic racial injustice in every institution, one by one. It's a never-ending search for the Benjamins. Oh, geez. Cori Bush. So she starts out as a Black Lives activist in St. Louis, who parlay that into becoming a congresswoman in D.C. I mean, seriously, this woman talks like she has the mental age of someone in third grade. I mean, I don't know if it's Ebonics or the language of the street. We're going to listen to her talking about an execution, which is kind of funny.
St. Louis and I rise today to remind my colleagues that there is no place in a humane society for state-sanctioned violence.
Nice hair.
On Tuesday, Kevin K.J. Johnson was taken from his family by capital punishment, from the systemic racism that tainted his conviction, and the state continuing to use executions to the Missouri and U.S. Supreme Court's denial of a state of execution. KJ was failed by our criminal legal system. Missouri intends to move forward with executions of 4 more people in the coming months. Congress must act. Congress must pass legislation to abolish the federal death penalty and encourage states to follow suit. I'm also urging our president to continue leading on this issue and act now. Commute the sentences of all those on federal death row, condemn state executions, and urge this administration, to stop seeking the death penalty. Let's abolish the death penalty once and for all. Thank you.
All right, so she's talking about the execution of some dude out there in Missouri who happened to be black, who killed a white police officer because he erroneously believed the police officer was responsible for his son's death. Now, the kid went into cardiac arrest as the cops arrived to question Mr. Johnson, KJ, as she calls him, over a domestic violence conviction. Seems he wasn't really a very nice guy. Anyway, she soon to be yesterday's news and good riddance.
St. Louis and I rise.
Good riddance, okay? Yeah, and here she is, probably, no, that's not her, I'm just kidding. All right. Al Sharpton. Jesus Christ. What can I say about this blowhard? Let's just listen to a clip. He gets 2 clips, actually.
Well, we want to hone in clearly on the aspects of this travel ban in terms of how it can be used to profile people. There are 6 of us meeting. Our organizations have been on record dealing with racial profiling, and this certainly is a profiling an area of real concern. We also want to deal with the Voting Rights Act. We just had the celebration of the 52nd anniversary of going across the Edmund Pettus Bridge that led to the Voting Rights Act in '65 that in many ways have been neutralized with the support of this Attorney General when he was in the Senate, and who has now said that he will not continue, as the Department of Justice has been doing, to support the whole fight in the Texas voter ID law case. The Legal Defense Fund, NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Sherlyn Eiffel, who will be one of the 6 leaders in the meeting, is directly involved in that. Yep. We want to talk about police reform. He says he's against consent decrees. Well, that's right down the area that many of us, Nash Action Network and others, have been involved with. And the case of Walter Scott, the man shot in the back in North Charleston, South Carolina by a police officer that was indicted, the trial waiting. We want to know, is he moving forward on that trial, and where are they on the Department of Justice investigation on the chokehold murder of Eric Garner in New York? So there's a lot of things that we are directly involved in that we want to address him on.
Yeah, okay. So he's talking about a meeting with Jeff Sessions, who was Trump's first Attorney General. I'm going to just note something about the consent decree thing, because this is how Al works. He finds a case, and someone promises to be a good boy. They deny any guilt, and then they pay the reverence group some money. It's basically a shakedown. We're going to play him again, talking about...
Well, we want to
he's responding to a comment by a black Republican senator from South Carolina named Tim Scott, who says that America is not a racist country. Now, here he is responding to...
Rev, let me ask you about something that's made some news over the past couple of days, which you also brought up during your eulogy. You called out South Carolina Republican Senator Tim Scott for saying that America isn't a racist country. It's also something the vice president agreed with. What is your message to Senator Scott on the day of Andrew Brown's funeral?
The day of Andrew Brown's funeral, I say to Senator Scott, what are you talking about? Are you talking about Americans are not racist? Certainly not all Americans are not racist. But when you deal with the systemic racism in this country, from its inception to the inequality that is still there now, from levels of unemployment to education to the criminal justice system to mass incarceration, how can you say that is still not based on racism? Either we're dealing with racial inequality because blacks can't compete and can't equal what whites do with merit, or we are still dealing with institutional racism. So he needs to distinguish, what is he talking about?
It's option
is he
one.
talking about the American people, or is he talking about a system that is still rendering unequal and unfair results?
All right.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one
Rachel
place.
Maddow, the cutest
Download
little
the-
boy. It's like
Rev, let me ask you about
used to
something.
be Ricky Schroeder, but anyway, there's Al talking about the systemic piss and the institutional shit. So, well, let's just move on. I mean, seriously. All right, this is she's the final one today. This is Kimberly with an E at the end, Crenshaw. Now, Derek Bell was the go-to guy when it came to critical race theory, but he croaked. So Crenshaw picks up the ball and goes running with it. Let's see her take on things here. Here she is. I don't know who Laura
It's
Flanders
a
is.
class issue, it's a race issue, it's a gender issue. There's an awareness of vulnerability coming not just from a lost expectation. This is something that Tim Wise talked about. It's not just loss, it's loss against a backdrop of expectation. So he talked about white nationalism having created a set of expectations about what is supposed to happen to me and what is not supposed to happen to me. And when certain things start happening that go against that grain, Luke Harris calls it diminished overrepresentation. You think you're supposed to have 100%, turns out you only have 90%. So that leads to the resentment, the anger, the righteous indignation. You have other people like Black women. The expectation is always forward looking. It's always, how's my life going to get better? It's not, this wasn't supposed to happen to me. So I think they just came into it with a very different set of expectations that then played out differently in the ballot box. That's the kind of thing that an intersectional analysis brings to the table.
All right, so her main area of expertise is intersectionality because you see there's this racial grievance industry and there's a pecking order in it, which they call intersectionality. So if you're Black, you're oppressed, okay? If you're a Black female, you're doubly oppressed. And if you're a Black female lesbian, then that's triple oppression. Your color, your sex, your sexual orientation, right? So I guess you have to do the math. So like a Black male, you're singly oppressed. If you're Black female, that's double oppression. You're Black and you're female. Now, if you're a lesbian, then that's triple oppression. If you're a gay Black guy, that's double oppression. Now, if you're, let's just say you're half Hispanic and you're half Black, that's 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1. And then if you're a female, you're 2, so it goes on. But I wonder what it would be if you're half white and half Black, like Barack Obama. That would make him 1/2 oppressed? I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm really not sure how the intersectionality thing works and the level. The only thing I can think of where we get to quadruple oppression would be a Black Muslim female lesbian. That's the only thing I can think of. So we're going to play Miss Crenshaw one more time here. There she is, Kimberly with an E. Oh, it has a little thing over the top of the E, so I guess that makes it different. And here she is.
Intersectionality is just a metaphor for understanding the ways that multiple forms of inequality or disadvantage sometimes compound themselves, and they create obstacles that often are not understood within conventional ways of thinking about anti-racism or feminism or whatever social justice advocacy structures we have. Intersectionality isn't so much a grand theory, it's a prism for understanding certain kinds of problems. African American girls are 6 times more likely to be suspended than white girls. That's probably a race and a gender problem. It's not just a race problem, it's not just a gender problem. So I encourage people to think about how the convergence of race stereotypes or gender stereotypes might actually play out in the classroom, between teachers and students, between students and other students, between students and administrators, and commit themselves to understanding that as a way of intervening and providing equal educational opportunity for all students, regardless of their identities. Identity isn't simply a self-contained unit. It is a relationship between people in history, people in communities, people in institutions. So schools do a good job when they understand that and when they commit themselves to curricular development, to opportunities in the school for all students to understand the histories that have brought us to this particular moment. You can't change outcomes without understanding how they've come about. So independent schools can take the lead on that to be responsive to their student populations and to the communities out of which the students come.
Yeah. Hey, well, okay. got to say there. So basically, it's all about race. Now, it dominates everything, and apparently sex does too, and then your sexual orientation. Okay, she said with respect to things like liberty and freedom, I think about Orville Faubus standing in the schoolhouse door. I don't know who this guy was. I think about owners of restaurants during the attempt to integrate them, using an axe to say, A, I don't want any African Americans in my establishment, and B, it is my right, protected by the Constitution as a property owner and as an individual, to express my liberty to discriminate as much as I want to. Alright, so this sister here, that's it for her. And join me again tomorrow as I finish up the top 4 race debaters. Lot to think about here, folks. A lot to think about, other than Orville Faubus. All right, that's it. Thank you. Have a great day. More pleasant tomorrow.